Okay, we've been having a little bit of a chat and a back and forth about current challenges in Western Australia with the borders being closed. And although we're in a relative COVID-free bubble, it's having some interesting dynamics on the economy and the way businesses are operating. And we're also finding a lot of feedback from clients that they're struggling to find people.
They're probably also going to say that they're struggling to retain people as a artificially constrained labour market inevitably drives up unit cost of the same labour as last week. So you're paying more for the same quality.
Yeah, or probably more for less quality, to be quite honest with you, in some situations.
Well, yeah, and I did talk to a WA client where I pointed out they're engaging the full labour market, not constrained to only the upper end or even the middle end, the entire capability you're engaging with, and that carries with it problems. You're going to have really good people who are in the middle of the distribution like you and me, and you're going to be dealing with people at the entry level or have some performance problems in your work crews.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's an old saying, a leader spends 80% of their time on the top and bottom 5% of their talent pool.
Yeah, I could agree with that. I think that, at the bottom end of your talent pool, you've got your people who are struggling and they don't fit your culture, and but they could also be quite difficult to work with. And at the top end, I guess you've got some stars, but you've also got some people can be, they're those very high performing people who might actually not be keen on playing nice with the rest of their team too. So,
And
um,
De Bono would call that the black hat view. I'll give you the yellow hat view.
yes,
You've got some high potential people who revel in any challenge you give them, and you need to stretch yourself to give them more authority and delegate them better and more significant tasks. So they
yep,
take a lot of energy.
yep,
And then you've got people at the, let's say, the entry level in your business that your team haven't got a good way of engaging them with the culture and haven't given thought to how do you get a new person enrolled in the team without shocking them or scaring them or exposing them to risk.
mm,
What's your way of getting a new truck driver into your team? What's the way that you can get a new machine operator running that quite intimidating looking CNC when they've never seen one before like that?
yeah. I I guess with the labour shortages, one of the things that's probably um, worth considering then is, well, if I'm struggling to even get someone, and all my effort actually, particularly at the people who are entry level into the team, is actually going into finding someone who's not available or doesn't exist, like where do I go next? And this is where the importance of process improvement, of eliminating waste out of your process, is going to become so critical, because the reality is probably the person you want is actually residing in your team right now, underutilized, because of the amount of wasteful activity that they do. And it won't just be one person, it will be across the board or everybody in the team. So the real the real solution there is not to pay more for talent that you're a little bit unsure about. It's not to put more job ads in. It's not to entice people away. It's actually, how about being a bit internally focused on how can we help the current team be really, really efficient.
Well, I would put one caveat over that. Usual step one is don't lose the workforce you have. Step two is remove the waste. That makes it more attractive for your team to stay working with you and avoids the need to hire more people.
Yeah.
So you can get yourself into that vicious cycle if you're in an upswing labour market and you don't look like you're fulfilling some of the basic needs of your workforce, they've got lots of options so they can go somewhere else.
Yeah, and they will for very little.
Yeah, very little push if your workplace or your leadership is missing some essential factors. So, like any client in an upswing labour market, I always say it will inevitably downswing. You need to be ready for that. But step one, make sure that the people that you actually do need to help do that process improvement aren't first out the door.
Yeah. I guess that comes to, if people really want to think about how much it costs to employ somebody, it's not just, whatever the median wage is at the moment, 70,000 a year. It's not just that cost. It's insurance. It's superannuation. It's the cost of finding them. It's the cost of training them. It's the lost productivity of the person who's training them. And it sort of goes on and on from there.
And I was forced once during a downturn in the mining market to put a price to it on a nominal 100,000 a year basic pay rate for an experienced truck driver. It was around about $30,000 to have to onboard, deal with the lost productivity, deal with the trucks or equipment standing idle with no operator, and bring them familiar with your plant, your mine, your operation, your team culture.
Yeah.
It was a third of the price of the annualized wage to have that churn.
So that's really interesting, because if you said to someone, I want you to find a person who doesn't exist right now because the labour market's tight, and you're going to pay them something like, say, $70,000 if you're talking entry-level positions, and it's going to cost you something like $20,000 to actually employ them. If I said to a business owner, yeah, just spend $20,000, and also there's no guarantee that's going to work, because it's fairly likely that someone else or that person will leave within the next 12 months anyway. That's going to make them think twice, isn't it?
It is. So labour and services, dollars per product, dollars per service, dollars per tonne, is often between a third and 2/3 of the total input cost of the product. So they worry about the inflation on building materials, let's say. And yes, building materials are on trajectory to go up 20-30% year on year. But that's a third of the input cost of me building a house. The other 2/3 is labour, and that is going up at the same rate and is much more influenced by turnover. So lost productivity, the value add, non-value add, the amount of scrap I lose in a piece of jibboard is far less than the value add, non-value add waste that I get out of labour. Where what's numbers, 5%, 12% of our time is value add, and the rest of it is waiting for stuff, finding a hammer, getting a ladder.
Yeah. It's quite a hidden cost, and we just seem to accept it and absorb it. But when you actually lay it out as something like a third of the cost of that person's wage or salary as being the true cost, and you probably every time you have turnover, that's something that you're going to incur, and it's a death by 1,000 cuts as well. It's many little things that has an impact on. Suddenly you realize that creating a process that your current employees enjoy working in, they clearly are in control of, they can see their performance, they have some interest in it, and also they feel very secure because the business is secure, becomes a much greater and more compelling reason for taking the waste out of the process and not having to employ someone.
So I agree, that's the immediate benefit. knowing that the labour market is cyclical. It's just the length and the height of the cycles that cause you worry.
Yeah.
But you also need to prepare for some other shortages, the capital shortages as interest rates go up. The labour market suddenly having a lot of labour available, and the pressure from the territory, state or federal governments for you to use local employment, full employment, don't fire anyone, we need to keep payroll taxes high. Removing that waste now when no one has got that regulatory scrutiny is absolutely ideal, because you're well positioned for the inevitable swing back down again, for the inevitable swing back up again.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's interesting too, because like here in Western Australia, and I guess you're probably also experiencing it over there in New Zealand, is that, whether you're dealing with, COVID, and in it, whether it exists or it doesn't exist, it's having impacts. And when things start to return to normal, borders open, we have more movement of money across borders because people are moving across borders and trade is moving across borders. It's interesting to think about maybe what will happen. Some businesses I've seen here in Western Australia are like, well, this is the best year I've ever had. I'm struggling to get people, but it can be flow-ons from construction and things like that. But what is really going to happen when the borders open and we have to either, like here in WA, we're going to have to deal with outbreaks, and I don't think anybody fully understands what that means.
So I don't think any of us need to be a genius to predict the course effects. So with a flowing labour market and flowing capital, you're going to see somewhere between 12 and 18% unplanned absenteeism as that first burst of Delta goes through the unvaccinated team predominantly. But the breakthrough infections to those who are double vaxxed will be there as well. Looking after your kids who are under 12 and currently unable to be jabbed. There'll be some unplanned absenteeism. The labour market will rebalance to a point, so labour will flow from where there's surplus to where there's deficiency, because the pricing will drive that outcome. Being able to ship products is there now, but being able to import from China, from Indonesia, from Brisbane, a cabinet fully assembled for half the price that it takes to build one in Western Australia. Have you ever seen the market refuse to take quality products at the lowest price?
No, of course. People are not that loyal. Ultimately, people are loyal to the best price possible.
So, for our clients, for you and me, it will mean that people have more selectiveness or selectivity. So they'll go and source the good or the service at the right quality at the lowest price option.
Gotcha.
Are our clients ready for that burst of unplanned absenteeism over a 3 weeks, a month, 6 weeks period? I don't think any of them are.
No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody's truly ready. I think that to an extent, a lot of people are actually waiting to see what will happen. But I don't think that they've thought about how do we prepare for a couple of scenarios. How do we we should start pulling the waste out of our process right now and make it as efficient as possible, because when whatever scenario hits us, it's going to be difficult to deal with, and it's probably going to have an impact on bottom line if we don't have a very efficient process. And I can say one scenario would be, let's say we have some absenteeism from quarantining or people looking after sick kids or what have you. Now, I'd rather have a process that people are very comfortably working in, because we took the waste out of their process, and we've got, say, 8 people, 10 people, but maybe we could get away with 6. But I'm okay because, my cost build up and everything is still quite profitable. suddenly I've got some flexibility with a couple of people. Now, take the other scenario as well. Let's say that there is an outbreak at my workplace, and I have to move at least one person onto COVID-related hygiene requirements, cleaning and things like that, and it's going to take a lot of effort and making sure that people are getting tested and all that kind of stuff. Well, hey, if my process has been leaned out, I've taken a lot of the waste out of it, then I have flexibility in my people's time. And whilst a core group of people can make sure we get the fundamental work done, we've got other people who can flex and change and shift to other roles. So they can take on that role of, quarantine expert or hygiene expert for the time when we need to.
It reminds me of an old saying in terms of the environment and climate: when's the best time to plant a tree? So Daniel, when's the best time to plant a tree?
When there's is it springtime? No, is it winter? I can't remember.
Let you off the hook. Best time to plant a tree was 10 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is right now.
Yeah.
So when's the best time to eliminate the waste? Well, the best time would have been a year ago to, get rid of the waste out of our process. But the second best time is right now.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense too. Like, it's better to be prepared than to just sort of walk in blindly to whatever's going to happen in the next 3 months, which, to be honest, certainly here in Western Australia, we don't know. I think maybe you can take a cold comfort in New Zealand from the fact that things have gotten away, and so the strategy is let's vaccinate, which means, there's a more predictable pathway to what happens once things open right up. And certainly New South Wales seems to be, doing all right with that. It's a bit out on, jury's a bit out on Victoria right now. They seem to be struggling a bit, but maybe that'll be changing in a couple of weeks or a few weeks.
So you'd be a better statistician than you and I am, but it seems to follow a defined pattern that you have that surge of high absenteeism, which then knocks itself out, and your level of vaccination changes the height and the duration of the unplanned absenteeism, but does not eliminate it.
Yeah. And I think when people are fearful of their jobs or they're fearful of their health, like they were in the east coast of Australia, then they're much more likely to be very motivated to go out there and get vaccinated. But you're still, as a business, going to be impacted. It doesn't matter, like whether they, if they get vaccinated now and there's issues around, hygiene, or they don't get vaccinated and you genuinely lose them or have to tell them they can't come to work. Like, why would you put yourself in a position process-wise that, you're not as efficient as possible and be able to cope with that coming and going of people, because it's going to happen.
The second best time to plant that tree is right now. Exactly.
It makes a lot of sense.
I won't say it's the worst time, but it's really tricky to do your process improvement while you have a looming external pressure.
Yes.
So
this is true. Or trying to do process improvement whilst half your team has disappeared to quarantine at home.
So, whether you're in the WA jurisdiction and Premier McGowan is telling you loud and clear that you need to be ready for February, or you're in a jurisdiction that's already opening or opened and you're dealing with the beginnings of the surge, or you're in New Zealand where the timing's more December than February, but the government has been very clear in foreshadowing what you need to be ready for by when. I think of it like when I worked in a big corporate, the most productive time of any team was that week before Christmas, where they were just clearing the decks of any work that needed to be pushed out for the next 2 weeks. And one mental model that David Allen in Getting Things Done talks about from time to time: think that you're Dr. Evil about to blow up the corporate monolith. What work do you need to get done before the building explodes at 4 o'clock?
Mm, mm.
It's a good mindset to take. We know what it's going to look like. Some variables about when. Let's get the right stuff done right now.
Yep. Yep. Stick with the fundamentals. Get the right things done.
And one of the fundamentals might be introducing a fortnightly report of what's happening over the next fortnight. What did we deliver? What are the risks and critical issues? And that pattern gives you some resilience when the unexpected happens.
Yeah.
There's a new risk. Well, let's add it to the risk register. What's the action that corresponds with that risk? Well, you and you are going to be working from home. You and you are on day crew. You and you are on night crew, and don't cross the beams. So day crews don't interact with night crews.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
You go. You've got a plan.
Got a plan, and you can manage it through a fortnightly report.
You can. And my apologies, the roosters are quite active today. It must be near tea time.
Oh, or he's just really keen to give his thoughts to the conversation as well.